Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to some more game dev. Here again today, working our way through my vacation time, trying to get to the end of chapter 1. For today's stream, I'm not sure what we're going to do. I think the title for this is going to be Miscellaneous Improvements, because that's likely what we're going to be doing. Just a series of small tasks. I don't know, maybe some of these will end up taking the whole video and I can rename this in the future, but as of right now, I'm just not quite sure what I need to work on next. The main thing is I would like to get to a first pass, at least everything penciled in for chapter 1 by the Sunday, and we can finish it up in Sunday's streams, but I'd like to have everything in place by the end of day Sunday, so that when we start week 4, the final week, I can switch over to focusing on trying to figure out how to get a build on Steam and spend as much time as needed on that, and then any remaining time after that can be spent polishing what we already have. But I think getting a fully playable chapter 1 is going to be the biggest indicator, because if we can get that, I can send it out to at least friends and family for feedback, and then eventually, after doing a little bit more refinement, potentially post some codes in Discord and get some feedback from you, the community chat. So that's the main thing. But in terms of like how we get to chapter 1 first pass, the big thing is we still have a number of cutscenes we need to build, and I've been working on and somewhat procrastinating, using this to procrastinate actually building the cutscenes, but I've been working on a dialogue importer and exporter off camera the last few days in between streams, and I think I just want to maybe finish up that idea today, and that seems like a good starting point. It may not take the whole stream, but again, we'll start there. So what do we have? Well, we have all our dialogue in these dialogue assets, which I find quite helpful, being able to have all of these sorted in here with the different information associated with them, as well as to be able to see, pretty complicated, sequences of events, but the green ones are basically showing a dialogue entry. And these get auto-generated from our cutscene maker right now. So when we come in here, fill in some of these values, give it a trigger name, set up its metadata for when and how it activates, and then we give it some amount of dialogue entries. When we hit create sequence, what was this one? Item drops was the most recent one I've done. If we take a look at that in, what would that be? H8, I believe is what this one was. We can see that when it generates the asset with all of those dialogues that I had put in here, and it also generates a sequence with just a series of dialogue steps, which allows me to come in here and add navigation or movement or changing of facing, like a number of different types of things to have the characters moving around and animating while this in between these dialogue entries being displayed. But I'm finding when it comes to editing these things or doing refinement passes, replacing placeholder text, or even building new ones, this menu is a bit cumbersome. It feels like I'm constantly doing multiple clicks to try and get this working. I did recently add the scroll bar to this menu, which it didn't have before, so we had to keep minimizing things in order to see entries at the bottom. The scroll bar is helping with this being more usable, but I don't know, it feels like this has been a very helpful tool getting us to this point. But as I've been working on this dialogue importer and exporter, I've been finding that maybe there's a different route, and this will probably still have its use cases, but I think we might be better served working on this stuff inside of a spreadsheet, because it gets very hard to get the full picture of all these dialogues here. But if I bring up the dialogue entries in here, this is what I've been managing to export essentially. It's much easier to read this linearly, and I've been able to add sorting indexes to these so that I can sort these on how I want them to appear. And essentially what I've done is we've wrote a very simple parser that this dialogue exporter will go through all the directories inside of our cutscenes folder, and inside of those directories, it will try to open those files as cutscene scriptables, which is the name that we have for the actual dialogue entries themselves. And when it opens those up, it will then proceed to build a little structure for the actual, like, for string data, essentially, for what is the sorting number, what is the name, as well as what is the character ID, the entry ID, or the entity ID, and the dialogue for those dialogue assets, essentially. And it compiles all of those into a big list of all of these TSV datas, and then we just do a write to our TSV file. And once that happens, bring this window over, we get like a big chunk of data like this, which I can then Control C, copy, and I can paste that into here. And I've got a little bit of conditioning formatting just so I can kind of color code the names, which makes it a little easier to read them. So we have all of the dialogue. Like, I guess we've written 200 lines of code for 200 lines of dialogue for chapter 1 so far. Some of this I think can probably be deleted. That was also the nice thing of building this exporter. It's like, oh, I'm not sure I'm even using some of these. Like, some of these I am, but others probably could also get a dialogue pass, because we didn't end up using the name of Vosswin until much later, so this one doesn't make as much sense anymore. So this has just been very helpful. But I think we could also do additional dialogues and cutscenes in here as well. So we have, this is a new one that doesn't exist right now, but I was kind of just building out like what happens when you deliver the tonic back to Yuta. And I'm trying to figure out, like, can we make it so that we put in information like this, and then similar to how we would create cutscenes from the editor window, essentially just create all of the assets if we find an entry that doesn't exist. Because right now we essentially take that TSV, the same thing that I'm exporting, I can also download as a TSV, which has basically the same information. And then this I can read in with this importer. It'll read through all the lines, separate the tabs out, and it will reconstruct all the information. And then when it actually processes the data, it reads in the same folder structure. And if it finds that the ID name is matching, then it will input the data that was found in the TSV into my scriptable assets. So I can basically, the short version of all of this is I can take all of the information from within Unity inside of all of these individual dialogue assets. I can bring it all out to the spreadsheet, edit it in the spreadsheet, and then bring it back in and update it into each of these individual dialogue assets. And I don't know, I feel like this is a useful tool. It potentially is replacing this window, but in some situations it might not be. It all depends on how I want to use it. But I think there's real value here. So what's missing? We need to add some more information to what we're actually exporting. Right now we only export essentially these 3 string fields. I'd like to also export the dialogue size, the close state, the alignment, and for now we'll leave out the emotions and the sound effects, as those currently aren't being used, but likely we would want to set those up as well, because these will eventually be used for deciding which portrait images to use, as well as which like VO lines to play, which are very, like, they're not full readings. We just have Japanese voice pack that I like, that I just feel adds a little bit of flavor, with characters just basically saying, huh, what, and just like little questiony kind of emote sounds, which I think it just adds to me personally. There'll be a toggle if you want to turn it off in the menu, but I like it. So but these things aren't being used, but these 3 are. So I'd like to make it so that we export these and import these, and I'd also like to make it so that if we don't find a corresponding dialogue asset to input the data into, it does the same thing that this editor window does right now, and essentially creates a new sequence and a new cutscene scriptable with the data from the spreadsheet. So we can essentially, I mean, ideally, I can come into here, write the rest of the cutscenes that I want to see throughout the whole game, and then just like bring that in, and it'll generate all of these files, and then it'll just be a matter of me going in and placing them in their corresponding map locations, and potentially adding more sequence steps for the movement parts. Again, it's about trying to reduce the amount of input time, and I'm feeling the friction right now with the current setup, and my hope is this will be like simpler. Anyways, enough talking, let's build. So first step, these should be easy. Let's get those added to the exporter. So when we dialog export, right now we are just grabbing these pieces of information. We also want to grab the dialog size. What is the order that we do these in? Size, close state, and alignment. I think I want to keep that consistent. Close state and alignment. Okay, now these are enums, so I will need to string these, I'm pretty sure. Cool. This is all kind of intro information, so we don't need to modify that. That should be it. So if we then do dialog export, that should have outputted the extra information in here. So if we copy this and bring that into here, paste this in, we now have these extra pieces of information. Now we get into some data formatting. So I would like to make it so this has some data validation, and Google Sheets was smart enough to figure out what I wanted. So I can now click a drop down to change these. I think I want them to be readable. Is there a way to make this smaller? Advanced options, show warning, reject input. I think show warning is better here. I do want the arrow. I don't think I want... Oh, if I don't have the little round part, then I have to click specifically on the arrow. I think I want to have it so I can click anywhere to change these. So that if I was modifying this, I could come in here and say, oh, I want this to be large. I want this to be medium. And I think we'd probably want to start with all of them being medium by default. So we can just drag this down. No, we can't. Actually, this will be a good test. If we add too many entries, will it try and parse this in? Or if it doesn't have a field here, I think it'll fail, which is what we want. Okay, same thing here. So if we go right click data validation, will this also figure out what I want? Close the window, then try. Add new rule. There we go. Make it a little wider, just so it's big enough that we don't get anything cut off. And that's fairly readable. Ooh, we can choose colors too. I think close self is going to be one that I'm going to want to keep an eye on, as well as close open. So we can do... Honestly, it doesn't really matter. I'll get used to whatever the colors are. But is there specific ones that I want to highlight more than others? Yeah, I think that works. Close self is going to be the most simple default one. That can be this bluish color. Stay open is important to notice, but I think I don't want it that bright. So being kind of a similar color, these two are very very simple, not too punchy. And then close open is very important when and how these happen. The ordering of these are super important, and we want to make sure that it always ends with a close self or close all, but that'll be trickier to validate. But we can maybe do something on the actual importer to make sure that that is true. Okay, next we'll come into here and we'll data validate this section, add a new rule. And then I think we'll do bottom with one color. Maybe green for all of the bottom ones. And then... Oh, we are missing an item here, actually. I guess none of our dialogues currently have bottom right. I'm going to double check to make sure the formatting is correct on that. So if we look at alignment, sprite alignment, which we're repurposing here, bottom right, as long as this is named the same, it should be fine. So we'll make that an option, and this can be this light green color. Center can be yellow, and then top aligned, we can make a, well, red's a little too intense. Sure. Again, I can always tweak these in the future. And then for this one, did I want to color code the mediums and smalls? Yeah, I do. I'm going to make it so large is a very light color. Again, we'll go with the dark color. Can I do a custom color here? Something in the dark gray value, but not the exact same as the other one. And then medium will be our default. And then small will get highlighted with, again, a very simple color. The color theory on this is probably wrong and overly distracting. But I will try it and find out what's working and what's not. Close self by default seems right to me, and then top center is also a fine default for anything in the future. The main thing we want to make sure of is that if we're having the same character speak, that it remains in the same spot essentially, and if we're alternating characters, we want to make sure that they are changing colors here. Maybe there's a way to better validate from column F to make sure that that pattern is happening in the spreadsheet, but we're not going to worry about that right this second. These are all right of center. Oh, I guess this is also valid, isn't it? Because you can have the goddess speaking right of center and the character right of center. So it's only when it's top and bottom aligned that we need to be making sure that we're alternating. Can I add the same formatting across all of these? Is there an easy way to copy the formatting rules? Data validation, formatting. I'm not sure if there's a way to copy these other than doing it manually. If I do copy here and I do like paste formatting only, it does look like it's still displaying with my colors and these drop downs are still working. The problem is this needs to now be pointing at, oh, it still is pointing at column F. Interesting. Oh. Oh, the formatting is going to be across the cells. Oh, I see. So all I have to do is modify this to be as far to the right as I want. So this could go from H to K then. No. This is H to K. Why did it not update these cells? Weird. I would think that would work. Additional formatting. I change this to K1. Okay, so it's something about the way that I'm formatting that this doesn't like. So if I just do this as a series of individuals, it would probably also work. But I feel like there must be a better way to select this. But let's just try this. Is that smart enough? It is not. It still doesn't work. Ah, it wants the custom formula to have a $sign in front. Okay, figured it out. So then we could go back to this, and I think now this will work. Because otherwise it's going to consistently be looking one to the left. Okay. So then if we just put a $sign here. That works. And then we just want to go through and update each of these. This needs to be 2K. Is this too much color? Possibly. But I do think I want to show who's talking at any given moment. And I want to see that all the way across to the drop downs. Cool. And then we just continue updating this. And then that goes there. And this goes okay, and that's going to be all my formatting set up. And now I should be able to update these. I'd almost like to be able to also find a way to like box this in, but I feel like that's going to be a real pain to do automatically. But it'd also be nice to see where each section is ending, essentially. I suppose we could add formatting for this section and even this one here that has the top line of each dialogue section colored. I'm going to investigate that later. Later we will look into that. Okay, so this has this data in here. Now if I bring this over and download this, download TSV, and then dialogue import, save that. If we look in here, this should now have all the information in the importer. Now if we come into this thing, we're going to want to actually bring this data into here as well. This will be not too bad. We can do dialogue size. In fact, can we just steal these? No, it's still going to be faster to just copy it. Close state and alignment. Cool. And now we need to make sure these are being set when we bring in the data here. We can just do that. And we know that element 7 was dialogue, so the next element in order will be the size. So this will map to dialog size. And then we do need to do some importing. Let's look at one of our other parsers that we've written in the past, like ability parser. Does this have any enums in it? It does not. At least I'm not spotting one right away. Flags. Here we go. This is the formatting for how we convert it into an enum. So we will steal that from that file and come over here and put this in element 8. And then the dialog size is what type of element or what type of enum? Literally just dialog size. Perfect. Size. And then we repeat again for the other two. So this will be column 9 and column 10 will go into closed state and alignment. And then closed state is the name of its enum, and this is like sprite alignment because we're reusing the Unity enum in this situation. Perfect. And that should allow us to import. We can test against this one. So right now this one has closed self, bottom center, and hello. So if I actually go back over here and modify this one as a test and go painting, yeah, I knew it was near the top. This could be small, close all, and top center. And then I'm going to re-download that into the dialog import TSV. And then when I hit this dialog import, we should see these update to small, close all, and top center. And they did. So that is working. We can export this data from these and bring them back in. That's step 1. Step 2 is going to be generating assets when there isn't one found. We do have some errors. Could not fail to find data for these dialogues. Oh, because these are all forest related. I think that makes sense. Because we're parsing through everything, right? Yeah, and so we just didn't find anything because I didn't end up bringing out any of the forest stuff. I think I actually, yeah, skip anything that contains the word forest because I know it's an old folder. Okay. So I'm going to fix this in another way as well. So let's take a look at this editor window and how it works, because I think we want to bring some of its functionality over into the dialog importer. So it goes through when we hit create sequence, when we hit the button, it will look at the information we've put in for the zone, the room, and the sequence name, and it'll try and make a file name for the sequence asset, and it'll try and make a file name for the dialog asset, and it also keeps track of the root. Oh, in order to create a directory if it doesn't exist. Okay, that's all fair. And then it tries to load assets at those locations, and if they exist, we don't create it. We say, sorry, you're trying to create something that already exists. And then if we get past that failure, that fail state, we instead create the objects, and we essentially populate them with the information from this editor window and give them addressable IDs. Yeah, okay, so this all seems fair. So I think I want to take this functionality and bring it over to the dialog importer, and I think in reality we could do it this way for how we actually try and build the assets. Currently the dialog importer actually loops through the entire directory like how we export, because the importer was based off of the exporter, but in reality I think we can use this setup, which means we don't have to loop through every folder. We can just create the files we actually find, or update the files we actually find. You know, and with that being the case, I don't even think we need to store this information anymore, because we were storing it into this dictionary so that when we looped through, so we'd loop through the text first, build all the objects, then we'd loop through all the directories. But if we're doing it this way, and we can just assume based off of the ID name that we can build the file paths. Yeah, we shouldn't need to do any of this. Okay, this gets a lot simpler. Okay. Coding time. And more accurately, copy and paste. So what if I just take all of this, copy the whole thing. What is this doing? Oh, this is updating the metadata. Neat. Okay. Yeah, we're going to steal that as well. So we're going to come in here. We're going to take all of this, and we're going to bring it over into the dialog importer, and I'm going to put its own function for now. This can be create cutscene. And it's going to complain a whole bunch because it's missing a bunch of information. Cutscene location. Do we have that data in here? Same file path, different name, I think. Assets, infinite retries, content, design data, sequences, cutscenes. That looks the same to me. Okay, so in this location, we're calling cutscene location, sequence location. Okay, seems good. Mainly need to worry about these entries. I was exporting the zone, the room, and the name individually into this sheet. In fact, we can open up these columns and see those extra pieces of information here. But really, they're just a combination of the folder directory. So I don't know if I really want to be exporting this, because I can kind of just read this information here. I thought it would be, you know, helpful to be able to at a glance see this data. But I think even if I wanted to do some sort of highlighting on this column, we could even do something as simple as text contains goddess realm, and that'll only highlight those ones. And then if we add another rule, text contains, let's see, woods is the next one that would make sense to me. Yeah, so I don't even need to have these separated in order to be able to do some formatting to make it easy to tell where these cutscenes are happening. I think I'm going to clear these out, which is going to break all our formatting. If we do it here and we delete these columns, it keeps our formatting. Okay, so the spreadsheet's smart enough. Okay, and then I'm going to change the exporter to not export all of that information. We don't need to know each of these pieces of information individually. We can instead just export the ID name. There we go. Now the importer is going to change because we've changed the order of the columns. So we've essentially cut out 3 from each one. So the ID becomes column 1, this becomes column 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Simplified. And that's because element 0 is the sorting number. Yeah. That lines up. Cool. All right. Now, we don't need to do this long ID. We will simply need to have the ID string, and that ID string will be this information. So we can just do that. Oh, unlockable characters with the hydration. Awesome. I'll do that. And then first time chatter, welcome in. I've not worked too much with Unity's ECS stuff. I know it's the new cool latest thing or whatever, but it has not been something that I've dug into. Okay, now for this one, we only want the first two pieces of information. We don't want the name, essentially, but that's fine. We can still get that information out by splitting the elements by... Ooh, what is that character going to be? Because we're splitting it by a /. Looks like it'll do it okay that way, so we'll just do id.split. Path elements, and we can do element 0 and element 1 should be the zone and the room. Perfect. Create save directory. We're going to need to steal that function if this is going to work, which is fine. This should probably be put into a utilities function, to be honest with you. Let me just bring it over and see if it had anything specific. Does not look like it. Yeah, we're going to put that in a utils. In fact, I'm surprised we don't already have a create directory. We do not. Okay. Because we have a bunch for processing folders and stuff. It doesn't like this because it's not static. That's perfectly fine. We also need to make it public. Cool. So then inside of dialog importer, instead of using this version that we had to copy, we can now just use the utils version. Create directory. Perfect. Create instance. I'm assuming we're missing a using. We are not. Why does this one... Is that another custom function we made? I can't imagine it would be. No, it's part... Oh. It's part of scriptable objects. And this itself is a scriptable object. No, it's an editor window. Is it because this isn't an editor file? I bet you it's because it's not in an editor folder. This is a function that only editor windows can do. Guarantee that's the problem. Where is this file? It's using the namespace Unity engine. Odd. Very odd. Okay. Oh, this is... Okay. This file is in an editor window currently. Maybe that's the problem. It doesn't like the fact that it is in an editor window. Maybe this needs to be outside of the editor window. let's finish building everything else. The other major piece of information we're going to need is the dialogue entries themselves. I think I may refactor this to not need the TSV data at all, but let's assume we do. From that TSV data, we should be able to get dialogue entries. Hook all of these up. And then the last thing we're missing is the metadata. I'm going to comment this out for now because we're going to come back to that problem later. Okay, so then the only other thing we're missing in order to create a cutscene is access to this create instance. Well, the easiest thing is going to be trying to move this out of the editor window and see, does it start working? Because I'm not sure it needs to be in an editor window. So if we just grab this thing, and then instead of this being inside of the editor, it was just, I don't even know, just somewhere in common for now. Visual Studio gets confused because it doesn't know where the file is anymore. Still doesn't want to use the create instance. Okay, so it's not to do with the editor window stuff or editor folders. It's something else. I'm not seeing any usings here that would feel like they would be the problem. Again, we're already using most of them. Why am I allowed to use this here? Is it because it's an editor window? And this is just a class? Don't know why you're using that. I found Visual Studio recently has started like randomly adding usings to the top of my files, which is becoming a pain to clean up. I'm sure there's a setting somewhere, but I have not bothered looking into it. I'm just instead being annoyed by it and moving on with my life. Yeah, okay, so this needs to be an editor window. Can this be an editor window but not actually appear anywhere? I think I can just make this a menu item. Yeah, I don't see why we can't inherit from that just to get the functionality. Cool. So this should work. I want to move the parse to be after we have imported and refreshed everything. I think this is probably not a bad idea to do in general. Just to do our parser to update all the metadata for our cutscenes into our JSON file. So we'll do that at the end. It doesn't need to be done on every single cutscene that gets created because we might create several. And now we want to refactor this setup. So instead of running through every single folder, I think we can just pull this data here out into its own function. So we're going to quick refactor. If it lets me. Did not like me having the bracket. It looks like that was the issue. Why did you add a... Okay, I see why you added the flow control thing. It's fine. We'll just do update cutscene. All right. What if this didn't need the dictionary? What if it could just get the TSV data directly? We assume we always have one. I think that's going to be a major change to how this works. And then instead of doing a source file, I think we can just do this. Here. This can be file name. And this will just need to be ID. Okay. Now we can get rid of all of this entirely. Clean all that up. Minimize this one. Get rid of process directories, get rid of directory stuff. And instead, when we come in here and we do the I'm going to break this down in a couple of different steps. I want to see what happens if we do TSV data in TSV datas dot values for each. That's what I meant. And then we're just going to rearrange the parameters to be the same. Then we just need to determine whether or not this TSV data exists or not. So I think we can even do this here. Rename for clarity. No, even better. Now, so if it finds that it's null, we want to create the cutscene sequence, and we're going to create that with the TSV data. And technically we only need to pass in the data, because the ID is actually inside of the TSV data. So we only need one parameter in here. We will need to still do a call to get the scriptable asset. Okay, this is fine. Kind of all over the place here, but this needs the file name still. This is all inside of menu items, so these all need to be static. Yeah. That should be fine. And then this one becomes update with the TSV data. I was originally hoping we could remove this read all step where we construct all of these TSV datas, but technically speaking, as we're reading line by line, we don't actually know if we're done with this entry. It's kind of done here, and we could kind of search forward to see if this is the end of the line or not, but I think this is actually going to be faster and easier. It's a tool, it doesn't need to be super efficient, and I can read this more easily, that this step is essentially parsing out all the data into TSVs, and then this is reading through those TSV datas and deciding what to do with them. Okay. That I felt like I lost the plot a little bit on, so we're gonna stop for a second and look at the console, see if we have any errors. We have some random warnings that have existed for a long time, so we're not worried about those. It looks like it's not actively complaining. There are some edge cases I am not covering. Right now, this assumes that if we don't have a scriptable dialogue, that means we need to create one. I think that's true. This will actually still fail with this setup to make sure that it never creates a sequence scriptable that already exists. So maybe this is fine then. It's already kind of got a locked in failure. And it won't break it from parsing the rest of them. It'll just log an error and move on. I would like to know which one it's complaining about though, so we probably want to add the ID here, because before this functionality was only used for creating one cutscene at a time, so I knew that what I was creating was already created, but in this context we're looping through, so we want to have an ID to know which one failed. This should all be fine. So in theory this should just work. I'm a little spooky to test it, but we can give it a try. Because I am modifying a bunch of my assets, but we have source control if we need to revert. So let's do dialogue import and see what happens. We did fail. Requested value. It's failing in here. Did we get our columns wrong? It looks like we're trying to convert the character name into an enum. So that definitely implies that we got our column indexes incorrect. So column 0 will be the ID. Column 1 should be... Sorry, column 0 is the sorting index. Column 1 is the ID. Column 2 should be the character ID. Then we have the entity ID currently hidden. Then column 4 should be dialogue. Column 5 should be dialogue size. Column 6 should be close state, and column 7 should be alignment. That's all looking correct. It's definitely saying it's failing in here, and it's failing to parse hero as one of these entries. Oh, we did not re-download this. That's the problem. We've since removed the 3 columns at the start here, but we have not re-downloaded the TSV in the new formatting with the first, like, the broken up columns of this data. So we need to re-download this. So we're going to download this as a TSV, overwriting our dialog import file, save. We can double check to make sure that data looks correct. Dialog import is now set up the correct way. And then we can do dialog import. And the main difference between every other time we've done this is mainly that it should be generating a new asset for one and only cutscene, the last one we had made, which was in I4, Delivered the Tonic. And that exists here with way too many dialogue entries. Okay, cool. So this is the thing I wanted to make sure that we were catching, and I'm glad I set it up. We added a bunch of extra information in here just to kind of see if we could just, like, you know, leave defaults all underneath here. But at some point it has failed because it is still reading these in as valid, because there's nothing checking to say, hey, is there actually a character here? So let's bring up Visual Studio, and then I guess what we want to do is if this element is empty, or string dot is null or empty on element 4, which is the dialogue, we want to continue. So do not add empty dialogues. Maybe it's the character, because we might want empty dialogues. There's a world in which that might make sense. Unlockable characters with the hydration, appreciate it. Okay, let's delete that. Let's delete that cutscene. Delete those. Hit save. Make sure that saves correctly. That's all fine. And try dialogue import again. Hopefully it's smart enough now to not create a ton of extra dialogues. It also went much quicker, which is what you like to see. No cutscene loaded. This one's fine. Woods I4 delivery tonic underscore dialogue. That is the correct name, but it is not finding it. I'm gonna guess because we generated one and then deleted it, the dialogue. We've got to type in the whole thing. Woods I4 slash delivery tonic underscore. It still only sees the one variant. I'm going to try unselecting this, go into here, see that it's failing, come back in and turn it back on again. Still failing to load. I've seen this before with the addressable system. If you delete something with an addressable ID and then rebuild it immediately after, it can break. Because it's not a problem necessarily with these dialogue steps. It's more an issue with like being able to look up this information. I'm not sure how to force a rebuild in this type of situation though, to have addressables like refigure out that this is fine. Usually I have to like delete and close Unity a bunch in order for it to figure it out. We'll try that here. Again, this is an edge case where like we kind of wanted to regenerate data. Normally I would not be deleting assets like this. So normally not a problem. All right, while that's opening, let's do a look at another problem. So this has the information about the actual like dialogue. This says who's talking. It says what dialogue, you know, size they're going to use, when the dialogue will close, and where it's anchoring. But there's also information about the cutscene itself that we may want to be able to write inside of our spreadsheet. So inside of any one of these other ones, we can see there's some metadata about its priority, whether or not it's repeatable, it resets on new runs, what its trigger name is, what response types it has. Like these are things that normally we would edit in here under this cutscene script sequence metadata. I think we could make it so that the additional columns further in our spreadsheet could fill in these informations if we want this. And I don't think I want to update this on, I don't know. Maybe there's a world where I want to update that information in here. We could also just ignore that step and just say like, hey, when you come into, yeah, okay, the asset's gone from the addressable list. Let's try importing again. We could say that when we import a new cutscene, though, part of setting it up is actually coming into here and updating this information. Yeah, see, after I close Unity and reopen it, addressables figured its stuff out. So By default, having the trigger name be the name of the ID would probably be one thing that would be nice. We wouldn't have to do anything for that. And we could probably default priority to 99 because that's true in most situations. We tend to just give most of our priorities 999 and then we lower them so that they don't interfere with other cutscenes that are higher priority. But this is kind of our default starting point. Repeatable off and reset on new run off are also fine by default. And in a lot of cases, they do want to be end of turn, but I don't know if I want to go... Yeah, a lot of our cutscenes end up being end of turn. It's much quicker to do that, technically, than it is to come in here and move my cursor down. It's a very small optimization, but I think I don't want to add it to this. Okay, yeah, I've convinced myself I don't want to add this data to the spreadsheet. I think when I go to make a cutscene, like to actually set it up in the world, I'm probably going to want to go in here and update this information anyways, because we're going to want to add new sequence steps to it. So we'll say that part of the workflow is that our spreadsheet will generate all of these assets for us, but when we actually go to like work on that cutscene and place it in the world, we'll want to go in and update the JSON data as we update its sequence steps. And I think that's fine, but I do want to set these to default values. So let's go into our importer inside of the create section. In here, we had commented out this part, and this was copying the information from our editor window. I think I now want to do a... Instead of copy, we should be able to just set this information directly here. So we'll by default say it's a end of turn of response. We will say that its priority is 999 by default. And we will give it a trigger name that ideally should be identical to its ID name in almost every situation. Cool. This means that we can't update these, but I think that's okay. Yeah, let's do a test. So I don't want to delete and re-add this one again. So we're just going to go into our spreadsheet. We're going to make a new one, which we'll call 220. I'll be deleting this in a bit anyways, but we'll give it proper information. So we'll say woods. Maybe this one is going to be a test of the room we're currently in, which I believe is G4. Capital G4 / and then we would give it a name, which is lost item, and then this would be like hero, and hero says the lost items. This doesn't matter. It could be small, could be stay open, and it could be right of center. And then maybe goddess could respond with you should take those and return them. That's a medium-sized dialogue for sure. Let's do close all, and we will do right of center. And so then if I download this into our TSV file, download TSV into our dialogue importer, and then we do dialogue import. I'm going to just double check to make sure I hit save on everything. We did. Hit dialogue import. Go to G4, lost items. This has the trigger name set, it has the priority, it has end of turn, it has the dialogue. So then after that's done, if I was to say wanting to, like, I could write all of these cutscenes, generate them all for myself, and then I could go through each map individually, and I wouldn't have to go touch any of the dialogue stuff anymore. I would only have to update this if need be. But if I was like, okay, well, next one on the list would be lost items, so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to find the cutscene section, we're going to turn this one on, we're going to call this lost item, we're going to make sure that we're entering from the bottom on this one, north. Looks like we're coming in from the top. So we're going to come over here, put this here. We're going to make 2 copies of it. So if you step on either tile, it triggers this cutscene. And we're just going to go grab the trigger name that we have auto-generated. And we're going to put that there and there. Hit save. And then we should be able to walk into that room and that cutscene should trigger. Bunch of problems because we don't have a proper debug flag set up for, you know, showing all the UI and stuff for entering this room, but it played the cutscene. Perfect. Great. And I think that's going to be the way to go, because now if I want to, I could just write the rest of chapter 1's cutscenes all the way down through here. And I could have different tabs for each chapter if I wanted to break them up that way. And then I would just download each chapter. And it's not deleting anything. It's only ever updating or creating. So even if our dialogue importer doesn't have every chapter's cutscenes, we could only have it importing the one that we're currently working on. And that would actually save a bit of time too, on import specifically, because it wouldn't have to go through and update every single one. Yeah, I like that flow. I think that that's going to be nicer to just be able to write all the dialogue, kind of build out everything for where I think some of the placements would be. But again, if I don't like the alignments, we can also do that test in here. So we can set up the map to have the dialogue trigger. And then when we walk in, we could even just come into here and make the edits ourselves. So I could be like, oh, I don't want this here. Maybe I want it on the other side for some reason. So we could go left of center, or we could go bottom center and see that update. And then we could have this one come in and we could say, oh, you know what? I actually want this to be top left. So it would be above the clock, but then that gets in the way of Hero's message. So maybe we do like left of center. So it's like message, and they read downwards. We can make those changes. We can call that good. And then we can move on to the next one. I think that's going to speed up generating the cutscenes. I've spent a bunch of time working on this. Maybe it would have been faster to just make the content. I think I am procrastinating just writing dialogue. But I don't know. It's still going to save time in the long run, I think. That's it for this, though. That is doing everything I wanted it to. So I'm happy with those improvements on the dialogue workflow. Let's leave this here for now. I'll clean this up later. What else do we got? What else do we need to work on? Yesterday we were working on the enemies in this section. We added some behavior to the green slime such that it would basically run away and find a friend once its stagger meter got up to 50% or higher. So in this situation, it'll flee and then eventually find a friend, and then they will come and attack us. Oh, I thought we had fixed this yesterday. Okay, that is still not fixed, but cool. So we tested that. So there's still a bug there with them occupying the same tile. I thought I had fixed that yesterday evening, but it looks like it's still just random chance is sometimes having it happen and sometimes not. I want to test something we didn't get a chance to test yesterday. Does the enemy properly stay engaged? Maybe we did test this. I want to double check it though. If it doesn't have someone to go find, if it doesn't have another friend on the map, will it stay in combat with us? Take out the little one. And then get its stagger meter to 3. And then we will just let it... Yeah, and then it stays with us and doesn't run away. Okay, so that's working too. I think I want to work on editing this map and another map. Which one's more important? Let's edit this map. I've been thinking that I want to simplify this one. It feels weird to go from a really small checkpoint map into a map that will have essentially no combat in it. But I want to simplify it, I think. There's a couple options, actually. You know what? I'm gonna go do a map that I know for sure what I want to do, or I'm gonna go work on a map that I'm positive what the layout is. I'm not positive how I want to change this one, but I want to have it so that when you enter in here, there's a very clear split in the road that Hero and the Goddess can have a conversation about going north or south, and which way he should go, and then the Goddess leaving it open to Hero / the player that, you know, at this point you could go either way, and making it clear that this is a divide and the player can start kind of being a little more free. Everything up to this point and the first checkpoint is essentially very linear, but this is the point where the game's going to break open a little bit and let you kind of choose your path, and hopefully I can kind of balance it in a way that there's no right choice, although I'm sure that there will be. There always is. Players will figure out a pros and cons until there is no more actual true choice. But I think for players just playing without like a guide, I think that this will allow it to feel a little bit more open. The question is whether or not we have combat in here at all, because this could just be serving to kind of feed the idea of like, do you go north or south and have no fighting in here? You know what? I want to try this one. I think I have an idea. And then we'll go work on the other map I want to modify after. So this is J6. We're going to open this. Make sure I grab the right one. We're going to open that in here. We're going to grab this layout. Let's go into our design data. We're going to go into the map tool, clear that, clear out everything, and paste in here. Oh, and then let's show it. So I've just pasted in the information in here. And now I'm going to just modify this. Let's try making this a very clear north-south divide. So the player will come in here. We can still have the water along this bottom edge. I think that's perfectly fine. But I want to have it so that there's a clear up and down. So we're going to grab this. Question over on the YouTube side, what's the name of the program you're using to create this? I'm working within Unity. This is a Unity-based game. I've spent like 5 years layering a bunch of my own tools on top of it, but Unity is the base. For example, this is my own system, so I want to see if we do low props here and just have this be all boulders. I'm gonna make this very simple to start. I'm gonna block it in and then we'll figure out better layouts after. I want to keep the water feel because I want this to feel like we've got like a little bit of a lake to the side of us essentially. So we're gonna keep a lot of water here. In fact, I think I might be able to get away with that all being water. I'm not sure if the player will be able to reveal that far ahead easily, but we'll give that a try. And then I'm thinking I want to make a little like dead end up here with some enemies. Let's add some trees. And then we're going to alternate. I think we can figure out the configurations of center versus back trees after. And then we'll just add some bushes here. I want to get rid of this curve so that there's less options for a player to get lost. I do think I want this to be a straight shot though. Maybe I just bring all this water up a level so that you're walking along the edge of the water here. Yeah, let's do that. And then we're going to just break this up a little bit. If I want this to feel like an open area, I think I want to do something like this. It's been a while since I've done any map stuff. I don't quite remember how I configure all of this. So we're going to just try building it and see how it feels. So we're going to grab this and we're going to copy this back into our TSV file. And we're going to paste this in here. Need to save that. We're going to double check to make sure the room is generating with that file name. It is. And then we're going to clear all the props and then generate from TSV. And that is what I just built in the editor. So now it's very clear, like, divide on which way you go, and then you work your way down and it still exits here from the same spot, but we have a room to have some enemies. I mean, we have like one slime here and another one over here. And then I'm just going to quickly regenerate some of these ones to be a little more larger assets rather than just grasses. So it's a little clearer that this is an area you can't move through. Do I like this? I'm not sure, but let's see how that feels. We'll give that a playthrough. These enemies are going to need repathing though. I feel like this is something I'm missing in terms of like enemy setup. I almost want to have like the pathing be like waypoints I can shift and move around that are like attached to each enemy, like as game objects underneath. I think that would make it a lot easier. A couple more comments on the YouTube side. It's starting to look really good. I've been popping in and lurking to time to time over the past year, and I feel like there's been a lot of progress recently. I like how stylized it is so far. Thank you. If you haven't popped in the last few weeks, I've been off for about 2.5 weeks now. I've got another week and a half off, basically 4 weeks total that I've had off, or I've taken off. So we're getting close to the end of my vacation time. But I am excited with the progress because I feel like we're getting close to being done with Chapter 1, which is a pretty major milestone. That's funny because I didn't update the pathing. That slime is going to try and go back to where it wants to go, which is up over there. And it's going to walk back and forth here because that's where it wanted to be. Cool. So the one thing I don't like about this is that I want this to feel like you're deep within the forest and you're making a choice, but because of the way the props are in terms of height, I can't really have like a line of trees here because it would completely block the player's view when they walk over to this side. This is something we've run into for a while now. Drixie keeps suggesting that I should make some sort of dithering shader, but I just don't want to dig into the shader thing, and I kind of like that when you step behind stuff, it doesn't become transparent. I like the level design challenge that brings me. So that's the question, is do we want to have this back here but sacrifice kind of this line of trees? I'm going to give that some more thought, but I'm glad to see my map tools, which we haven't touched in the past 3 weeks because we've been so focused on cutscenes and a lot of the other stuff, are still working. So that's good. An incentive to go to the side area would be nice, but also some combat would be an enjoyable aspect. So showing one enemy close to the entrance to indicate more could be inside would be a choice you could make for sure. I definitely was thinking that this would be a good spot to put items. It's funny because originally we didn't have a lot to give the player, but as part of some of the recent changes we've made, I've made it so that the enemies drop crystals, and those crystals are required to unlock skill nodes in our skill tree, similar to like Final Fantasy X sphere grids and its sphere items. And since I've done that, I feel like there's so many more items that we can give out, just because each node type has its own item associated with it. And I'm almost feeling like these maps I originally built didn't have enough dead ends originally because there wasn't anything to put at the end of them. I was like purposely building these maps without dead ends because we had nothing to give, but the design change to have these items be required for the skill tree has finally given me something to give the player, and in turn given the levels more reasons to have you know, spaces for players to find those useful items from. Ramble. I think I got my, I think that makes sense. I think I got the point across. We're going to open this one's map. We're going to bring that into the map editor. We're going to clear out, let's make it visible. We're going to clear out this bottom half. So then in this one should be easier. I want to reinforce the barrier item. So we have the bridges that you can knock down in the form of like stumps once you unlock the mace ability. But right now it only happens twice. Once when you deal with this adventurer, and then a second time in order to give you access to the first checkpoint. But I want to really hammer home this bridge idea before you even get here, and so I want to give another opportunity for players to be able to see one of these bridges in action. So once the player has gotten Bash, goes over, tries to save the adventurer, and fails, which is going to be it's part of the narrative, but I do think it's going to be a hard pill for players to swallow. I'm still interested to see what the feedback is on it, because you're going to die a lot early on, but I'm hoping it will create the sense of progression as you go from being very weak and essentially not able to do much to eventually becoming that overpowered isekai trope. But when you die to this boar, I'm going to want you to come through here, skip past this area, and eventually go into the final room and get the checkpoint. But I think here we could also have another one of those stumps so that the player can be like, oh, there's more to do with this bash. And hopefully if they didn't see or click in with the stump up near the checkpoint, this will be another opportunity for them to be like, oh yeah, this is the thing I should do. And then they physically have to walk past this one in order to continue on. So hopefully they'll notice this as well. I just want another teaching moment here, or another opportunity for the player to find use out of these bridges. So here we're going to add a bunch of water, and I think we just have it go down left to a dead end where there's a stump that you can knock over to a little island down here. Let's build it. So we're going to have this break off this way. We're going to add a bunch of grass here so that it looks like a trail that you can't walk, but players can explore if they so choose. We'll have this mostly be water in here, I think. And we'll just wrap this area. We can leave this be bushes and stuff back here. We don't need to do... we don't need to change these to be water. I think this can just be a layer of water back here. And then we will have a little island that you will cross here. We'll have water on this side, and we will have more bushes going along the side here and here. And then this little island will just be... I don't even want it to be that big, to be honest. Maybe just like a little square like this. Maybe add an extra floor here. Maybe 2 there, 1 there. Just make it a little bit odd sized. And then we can just wrap this whole thing in water. Like so. I don't think the player will be able to reveal all of these tiles, but that's also okay. For these islands we've done elsewhere, I also like occasionally just having like a bush or like a stone off to the side, so there's just like a little island. Oh, but normally you can tell it's an island, so maybe we do that here so that players don't think that there's something over here that they can actually reach. A level of warning helps prevent frictions for player from experiencing too. If you expect something far too challenging to occur early, I always appreciate a subtle nod that it's obvious might not be the best idea, but could be in your case. I'm not sure. No, 100%. The trick with what we're trying to do is we essentially have the player dying over and over again, but it's partly to reinforce this idea that like you are losing and restarting the run, and almost Majora's Mask Groundhog Day resetting and starting anew. And so in order to try and get that core mechanic across early and quickly, we're having a lot of like fail cases, which again is going to feel bad, is my fear. But I also think that it's going to be required for the rest of the game to make sense. So it's like, again, a hard pill to swallow for the rest of the mechanics to work. And maybe that is too much and becomes impossible to get across, but we will find out. So we do want this to be water, not floor, so that we can build a bridge across. And then we could have a couple of trees here as well. They don't have to be, this doesn't have to be all floors. We can have a couple of sparse tree pieces. And then maybe one of these could be just a bush, and this could be a stone down here. I think long term we're going to want to do a lot of polish on a lot of these spaces as well. I think we can get away with a tree here, because trees diagonally cover about 4 tiles. So this will cover to about here, but hopefully doesn't eclipse this walking space if you reveal it. And we might even want to bring this all in by 1. How large are the bridges currently? When we knock a bridge over, it is covering a divide of 2, so I do want to keep that consistent, actually. Okay. Yeah, let's try that. Let's see how that looks. Bring it in, paste it in. Oh, no. Oh, I didn't open the other one in here. I opened it in Notepad, I think, by mistake. This was H8. So we'll open that file into VS Code. We will paste it in. We will hit save. Do we have any custom props in here? I don't think so, so we should be fine to clear everything and regenerate. Ooh, that failed. Oh, worked the second time. Okay. This might be covering too much of this tile. We're gonna have to actually play and see, though. We're gonna need to steal the bridge interact. Now, how does this is a complicated setup, if I remember correctly. We have the actual interact itself, which has a number of triggers associated with it and flags. Yeah, and each one of these needs to be custom. So I think this is a situation in which the cutscene builder still has value. So if we're building like dialogue cutscenes, everything we did at the beginning of the stream with the spreadsheets is going to be really valuable. But if we're just doing a very simple cutscene, which is going to be like Stump Bridge in room H8, we don't need to have this be anything complicated. It can just be a cutscene that we create. It doesn't even need dialogue associated with it. Does this button still work? Did we break it? Cutscenes. We don't need to have the Demon Lord's Castle or the Goddess Realm open right now. We can close those. Stump Bridge in H8. That exists. We don't need the dialogue asset, so we can get rid of that. Oh, we didn't update the trigger name. Do that and update the JSON file. This button's felt helpful and useful. I'm liking that. Okay, so then if we steal this, copy it, come over to here, paste that in here, make sure it goes under the room, and then drag it into position, say, here. Maybe on the far edge. Maybe here. And then, how did we actually build the bridge itself? What is the setup here for these? So this has a pathing override tile and a decal tile. And then it's using the required flags to determine what the pathing is. Okay, okay. Let's see here. If we do... We can't just copy these. These are kind of... Each of the green ones are essentially like built as part of like a very custom map setup. I think I have to recreate this functionality, which is unfortunate. Yeah. I'm going to double check, but if we have a loose prop tile, does it get found? Prop tile. Does our system... It generates all the prop tiles, very helpful, but do we ever just find the prop tiles? Like, how do we like parse through and find all of these objects? Is it in a list somewhere? This is all part of the generation code. I want... Yeah, this is for saving the map. This is for the interact tiles. We loop through and find those. We loop through and find any pathing override tiles, so those don't need to be tied to anything. Oh, okay, we do just find prop tiles. Interesting. So I think that means I actually can steal these wholesale, even though they'll be doubled up in the same spot, or even in a different spot. Maybe they still work. Let's see. If we come into here, drag these in, rename this to bridge, and then name this other one bridge _1, and then retag these to be orange, which is normally like our interactable symbol. Maybe for this case, this is like a prop that's not part of the core grid. Maybe that's... No. Yellow? That's similar to orange. Okay, so if we put these two here... Oh, it's confused. It doesn't have a reference to... Okay, this is the difference between an interactable and a prop tile. So an interactable actually takes the prop builder as a reference, which does cause problems. So why did you get rearranged? You went from being a round tree to being... You went from being a stump to a round tree. I guess that's just because the indexing is different between these two. Yeah, this has 87. If I do populate props, it goes to 114. Yeah, so this one just hasn't been populated in a while, so the index of the prop that it wanted to load changed. There's still some weirdness. There's just a little bit of friction in some of these spots that just feel a little bit off. Okay, so do these get set? Does this set its parent prop asset when it loads? This thing. It hides it in inspector. Yeah, when it instantiates all of these objects, it sets it. So if we copy them between scenes, we lose that reference. But if we just get rid of hide in inspector, can I not just re-drag it back in and it just starts working, question mark? It's going to complain a bunch, like with all these drop-downs being empty. That's because it's having a huge fit. But if we drag this back in to both of these, we have to show metadata so that we can see those variables. This is in here. But all of these are broken. Yeah, when we copy them across, it like severely breaks. It shouldn't have to, though. Like, I think the main problem is that these are expected to be generated. Does this get used in some way? Does it have to be in this list of prop tiles? Yeah, kind of. But again, that's only for generating it from a TSV, which 100% we want to have. Yeah, all of this is fine. If it's part of the core group, yes, we want it to be a part of this list. But it shouldn't have to be part of that list in order for it to be found and saved out into the map data. Okay. So why is this not filling in its dropdowns? Like, why, like, even though I've added this back in here, why are these dropdowns broken? Oh, they're working now. Okay. The indices were broken here, though, so this is still needing to be changed to be what a decal test is what I had these as, just as placeholders for when Drixie actually gets us a sprite for the bridge itself. And then these had height values, I thought, but I guess those got lost. Maybe that's right. Are these ones floating a little bit above as well? They are. And okay, that makes sense because the actual tile it'll be on is a little bit lower, so it has to shift itself up to actually line up when it loads in, because these are always at floor level and don't realize that the water they're on is below at the... Yeah, it's fine. It's all fine. Okay, so this is all set up. The main difference now is instead of all of these flags being on H6, they'll want to be on... Well, whatever I called it. It's not actually Stump Bridge. What did I end up naming this? H8. Oh, it was Stump Bridge. Okay. So yeah, so all of these flags want to be modified to be this flag that they're checking against for whether or not it loads the bridge and whether or not the floor is walkable. They're all defaulting to pits, which is fine. We can turn off metadata for these now. I think it should work. Fingers crossed. This requires, in order for this interaction to happen, for you to have done the mace pickup cutscene, which is still true. The trigger name for this will now be this one here, so it'll play this cutscene. It needs to have this flag, and that flag is already set. The entity IDs should all still match. So then it got changed again. Trees 50. Okay, something's a little... I don't like how that's modifying our pieces on us. But those ones stayed. It's just something about the interactable is not holding its references correctly. Okay, and then last thing is the actual Stump Bridge itself. What was it doing? So it had these sequence steps associated with it. You know what? It probably would have been faster to just copy this, because now I'm going to have to recreate these in here. If we copy it at this point... Can we untick this addressable and retick this one? Again, sometimes this gives me difficulty. These should all remain the same. The only major difference between these two cutscenes is the actual tiles they're modifying. So it's going to be modifying 13,5, 13,6, and 13,7. So that they all become walkable after everything appears and disappears. Okay, and then this is still called Fallen Stump Bridge. Oh, this one needs a different entity ID. This needs to be Fallen Stump Bridge 1. Fallen Stump Bridge 2, apparently. Okay. Let's try. I feel like that took like 15 minutes for me to add this bridge. Like, that is just too much time to set this up. Even with a lot of copy and pasting, there's some amount of like refinement with moving props between maps that needs to be done. We need to change our default setup here. I've had Stranded on for the background for the whole time. I'm sure that was annoying some folks. My bad. I know some people don't want the music on at all. But usually I try and change it up. But I find Stranded is just very relaxing. Same with this one. I feel like I could have them on for a full 2 hours and I'm totally fine with it. But not everyone can. Okay, so that is working. That's good, at least. Hero is never not visible behind this tree, but the question becomes, does that tree block some of the other parts over here when you're dealing with this slime? Yeah. It's a new cutscene we've added recently. So again, you're never not visible, but I think the slime might become lost in this particular setup. What if we swap this one out? So this is currently doing the largest tree we can do. What if we change it out for just a slightly smaller tree, like 86? And then one of these can be 96. This one over here can be tall instead. This one be tall too. Why not? Drixie's going to be annoyed, though, because the floors had been done on this one, and now she's going to have to redraw it. My bad. Yeah, that's much better. Just 10 pixels smaller, or even slightly different top of the tree shape, I would imagine. Yeah, a slime might be able to duck here, but it's not going to be fully obscured. So I think I'm fine with that. Cool. And then even then for the first tutorial, a player might be able to come over here, see the stump, but like there's nothing at this dead end, and then head back. How much time does a player lose by doing that? They go over here, I was at 302, hit the dead end, come back. Like 16? No. Brain? Work? Yeah. Approximately 16 seconds. That should still give the player a ton of time. I think right now they end up with like 1 hour at the end. Yeah, this is not going to be too much of an ad. It shouldn't disrupt the gameplay too much. I don't love the player being able to stand back here. We're just going to change this to be... an asset that prevents you from moving there. And then we want an actual thing at the other side here. We're going to do stagger power increase, which I think is going to be helpful for unlocking the player's progression. So this one here we drag in, we're going to paste it, we're going to put it under here. We're going to drag in the prop manager for it. We're going to move it to somewhere here on this little island. Yeah, and it changed it on me to the hammer. So I have to come back in here and change it to steel chest. We need to do clear flags and then resave so it actually gets the correct information. And all of these should now say H8 and 1211 for the generated IDs, and they do, so that should be fine. And that should be an interactable you can find. And then if I want to be a little bit mean, we could also put one of the big slimes here. Which one of these was the big slime? This guy. We can also put a big slime guarding this, which I don't think will interrupt the player's ability to get to checkpoint 1 on the run after they fail to defeat the boar. But I will double check and do a full run through later, which I've been meaning to do. I want to do a pass, but I'm kind of debating whether or not I want to wait until we actually get to having everything in place first. What do I mean by that? I'm kind of wondering if we want to do like a pass once we get to chapter 1 mostly complete, like at least getting to what will be the eventual boss room. So that the player can get a sense of, or so that I can play through and get a sense of what still needs polishing, and we can do kind of a video showing like all the progress. I don't know. Maybe it's still better to do an initial pass sooner than later, but I think we're going to need to play through chapter 1 a lot to really polish it up, though. Cool. So this should be a small little space in which the player can walk across to this island. Once they have the mace, it's just another spot where the knocking over a stump to make a bridge is going to be useful, and they will be able to do a small fight versus a green slime. And then get a reward. Yeah, this might still be too much. Yeah, this one slime is almost killing the player. Okay. Green slime's likely too mean. We'll do another small slime. We'll have it with the same setup. 14-10 and 12-9. Cool. This is not a big change, and it took me like 20 minutes, but I think it's going to help with the flow. I think it, you know, we never know when we're designing things, but I believe it's going to be a little bit better. Now we come back to this one. I think, yeah, I started a little bit late today. I think we're going to call it here. The big next steps really is I need to write the rest of the dialogue. I need to go in and I need to, now using our dialogue editing or dialogue importing tool that we spent the first half of the stream working on, I need to write the rest of the dialogues to the point where you are done chapter 1 essentially. I need to import those, and I need to get those all placed in the world. Even if combat isn't feeling great, or even if the progression curve of like how many items you're getting and how the skill trees work, because honestly I still need to do a full pass on the skill trees for every ability as well. But even if none of that stuff works, I want to have it so that you can at least like play through it as if it was a visual novel, and you could walk through and explore and complete all the quests and get to the final room through all the cutscenes, and then we can figure out how to make combat feel better and the progression loop if we have to, you know, next week during polish. But I just want it to be fully playable from end to end. And so we're going to call it here. And that has to be my goal this evening. No more, I can't use like the dialogue importer as like as a bit of a get out of jail free procrastination device. Because like it's, oh, well, it would be easier to do all this stuff if I had this tool. Well, the tool's built. Now I have to write the dialogue. So no more procrastination. So this has to be what I need to do today. And then hopefully tomorrow we can come back and just be working on bringing all this stuff in and having all the routing set up so that the player can actually beat Chapter 1. Yeah, that's it. That's where we're at. For now, though, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.